If I would have told you 2.5 to maybe 3 years ago that Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic are fighting, you'd have been happier than a pig in slop. I mean, you'd have been like, yes, Jones is finally moving up. He's fighting the best heavyweight of all time. Francis Ngannou's there, and they've got this young guy named Tom Aspinall you really need to know about. That's what you would have thought back then. But it is 2024, and we're asking ourselves this one simple question. Is Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic a pointless fight? It kind of is. And the only reason people are mad about this fight, I'm not as mad about this fight as a lot of people are. A lot of people will act cool and be like, oh, this fight does not matter. Like, you're not about to sit down there like the degenerate you are and watch this fight. You are force-fed Apex slop every week, like the fat kid from Matilda's. You're gonna eat your cake. You're gonna watch Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Before we get into this episode, take a second and consider subbing to the channel via YouTube membership or via the newsletter, where we will be having a Bo Nickal article come out just for you. An article and a video is coming out just for you. It's cheap. Come on, baby, support the channel. You're going to. And look, I get it. I understand the argument. The fight is holding up the division. Heavyweight's one of those divisions where it's okay to be held up because there's new contenders constantly going in and out. I understand Tom Aspinall deserves a title shot. I think Tom Aspinall's the real champion. But if you're not excited about Stipe versus Jon Jones, you're missing out. You're missing out. Not liking this fight is a lot like not liking Fury versus Usyk. Now, granted, Usyk did fight everybody, and the layoffs aren't there, and there's not an interim champ there because boxing has 10,000 belts to go around, but you're watching two greats of an era show down. And this is kind of the closing of the Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic era. Those two guys dominated their divisions. I mean, the resumes are phenomenal. If you go look at who Jon Jones has beat, it's incredible. If you go look who Stipe's beat, it's incredible. So yes, I am excited about Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Sue me. I don't care. I don't. This is going to be a fun fight. I know the heavyweight title should be on the line for Aspinall, but I'm going to watch it. And I'm going to love it as I watch it. As bad as Jon Jones has been, as long as Stipe Miocic has been off. Because remember, he hasn't fought since he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou. So I completely understand the skepticism around this. But don't let it fool you. It's a fun fight. Just based off of legends alone. Would you rather watch Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul this weekend? I mean, come on. Stop kidding yourself. You watched Verna Jandiroba do a main event a couple weeks ago. You're going to watch this. Stop fooling yourself. All right? Just stop. So the fight itself is not as interesting, if we're being honest. Jon Jones, old. He's regressed a lot. He's not as exciting as he once was. He doesn't throw elbows. He's just regressed, and we've seen that regression from the OSP fight on. Now, a lot of people point to the Gustafsson and the DC fights. We're not talking about the DC fight because DC's from Louisiana, and as a Louisianan, we don't talk about DC losing to Jon Jones. Picograms in that fight, boys. Picograms. He's a steroid cheat loser. Picograms. Now, when he's fighting somebody else, we don't talk about that because we actually do kind of like steroids, but shh, don't tell nobody. But Stipe Miocic against Francis Ngannou. Let's go over to the web real quick here because I feel like there's some explaining we have to do. This Stipe Miocic right here, this title, you could even throw in Andrei Arlovski there, even though he was past his prime, right? Arlovski, Fabricio, Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou. That's the best run in heavyweight history, as far as I'm concerned, for the UFC. Then you throw in DC loss, then the 2 DC wins, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can get behind this. He's a great heavyweight. 2-time heavyweight champion, beat DC, who was a double champion. He's fantastic. And then we have right here. So you'll notice these DC fights. 2018, Cormier fought Derek Lewis in between these 2 fights. Then 2019, 2020. It's a year off in between. He's aging rapidly here. 2021, another almost year goes by, or half a year goes by. Loses to Francis Ngannou. Small cage, very, very, very weird circumstances. And not saying that Francis Ngannou wouldn't have won that fight regardless in a bigger, small cage. Stipe's gone at this point. This amount of time off, though, has shown, like, we need to know what Stipe is going to bring to the table. But fortunately for him, he's fighting a fat, blown-up Jon Jones, who has also regressed and has a lot of time off. So think about it back here. This run right here, Reyes, Santos, and Smith, you even throw in Gustafsson there, not a great run. OSP, not a great run. The no contest DC, he was getting dog walked there. Look at the date, though. 2020, 3 years off. 2023, another year and a half. That was March of 23. He fought Cyril Gane at heavyweight. Another year and a half, he's fighting Stipe. Supposed to fight him last November. Took a year off because of the torn pec. So Jon Jones hasn't been the most active fighter. And that, I think, can play into both Jones and Miocic's hands. I think Stipe, if he goes out there and he fights at range and kind of lulls Jon Jones into this type of fight that we've seen him lull into against Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith and maybe even Dominic Reyes, even though that was a bit more closer to Dominic Reyes being the man. I think you can fathom a Stipe Miocic win. Now, if we're putting money on the line, we're going Jon Jones all day, just because Stipe's just looked horrible in his last few fights. So I don't know. There's no point in really predicting this fight. The heavyweight title is on the line, and he's talking about going to fight Alex Pereira, leaving his title, fighting Alex Pereira for the BMF, maybe like a cruiserweight bout, like 220 or something like that, which would be kind of interesting to see what Jon Jones would have to do to cut down to that weight. But, like, picking that fight's kind of pointless. Like, yeah, okay, Jon Jones probably going to win, but what does he gain from that? A great name on his resume, sure, and in 10 years, everybody's not going to remember the fact that Stipe was washed by then. Only the diehards are going to be like, oh, but Stipe was washed. You don't remember that with Larry Holmes. That's a little bit more extreme, but you know what I mean. You don't remember that when an old fighter like Roberto Duran fights somebody old, or when Sugar Ray fights somebody old. You remember they fought a great of the sport. Rocky Marciano fought Joe Louis. Everybody's like, oh, he fought Joe Louis. Yeah, but Joe Louis was old and decrepit by that point. So what did Marciano do? That's going to be the same case here. We're going to remember in 10, 15, 20 years, Jon Jones fought Stipe Miocic and beat him, or Stipe dethroned Jon Jones. Daniel Cormier, like, he's the light heavyweight killer. I'm excited about the fight. I am. I understand the criticism about the fight. That I get. But we're not going to sit here and pretend like this is Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, because it's not. Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira is your co-main event. Conor McGregor's never fighting again, guys. There's no way he fights again. He's gone. Michael Chandler's going to uncrown, saying if Conor McGregor comes back, it's through me. Conor's said, hey, I want to fight Dan Hooker, take an easier fight. So there's no way Michael Chandler fights Conor McGregor. It's supposed to happen at 3:03. Remember, that's the fight. Pereira stepped in on short notice with a broken toe. Why Conor pulled out was a broken toe. He's fighting Charles Oliveira. Now, Oliveira's coming off of that loss to Arman Tsarukyan, and we learned some things about Oliveira. Now, you can also say we learned it in the Islam Makhachev fight, sure, but we learned some things about Oliveira in that Tsarukyan fight that Michael Chandler is capable of pulling off. Okay? We're going to go to the trusty web here again. I want to make sure I have my timeline right. So let's go to 309. Let's scroll down to Charles Oliveira. and his record. Yeah, so you got the Islam Makhachev fight, which is where he lost second round arm triangle. I was in the hospital with my daughter being born this day, actually. So I missed that fight live. I still love my daughter. Then he goes out and beats Beneil, round 1 ground and pound. Beneil looked like he was right there ready for a title shot, and he couldn't get it done against Charles Oliveira. And then he takes on Arman Tsarukyan, who's like the second coming of Islam. They gave Islam a very tough fight. And in a very close fight, last 40 seconds, he did have Arman in, I believe, a guillotine or something of that nature. Ended up being a split decision. But what we learned from that Makhachev fight, and what we learned from that fight with Arman Tsarukyan, is that Charles Oliveira is controllable on the ground. Now, if you know how Charles Oliveira fights, you're going to know that he uses submissions to create scrambles to get up. He's got the most submissions in the UFC because he's constantly fishing, sure. But he uses like the arm bar. Like arm bar's like a very low percentage completion in the UFC now. Actually, hold on. Let's take another look at Oliveira because I want to show you like what it is. Like rear naked choke. Let's see, guillotine choke for Kevin Lee. Knockout, anaconda choke, rear naked choke, rear naked. How many arm bars do you see here? How many omoplatas do you see here? How many arm triangles do you see here? Not many. Rear naked choke, guillotine, Peruvian choke. That's cool. Triangle. You see, you don't see many of the triangles either now. That was back in 2014. Darce, you can see a lot of. A calf slicer one's crazy. Rear naked choke, and there you go, armbar right there. He uses the armbar to create scrambles. He used them to create scrambles, to create chaos on the ground while he's on the bottom, and that's where he gets you in transition. He'll go to your back, he'll get up, and then he'll start dinging you up on the hands. And that's where Michael Chandler failed the first time. He had Oliveira hurt. Michael Chandler loves his hands early in a fight. He had Oliveira hurt in the first round. Don't forget that. This is a rematch, by the way, if you couldn't tell. But what he needs to do here is get him to the ground and not search too much damage. That's all it's going to take. Get him to the ground, hold him there, do enough so the ref doesn't make you get up. That's how Michael Chandler wins this fight. Will he fight Conor McGregor after this? No, probably not. Conor McGregor's probably never fighting again. But what this fight will tell you is just how far gone Michael Chandler is. Because he's ancient. He's old. He's been off 2 years praying to Conor McGregor, please, Daddy Conor, fight me. I don't know why Michael Chandler's got the Irish accent, but he is. Like, the inactivity does worry me, but Chandler was taking some beatings. Let's not forget, Michael Chandler was taking some tough fights leading into this fight, or right before his layoff. Oliveira, he lost. Justin Gaethje, he beat the brakes off of Tony Ferguson after getting clipped. That front kick, you remember, and then the Dustin Poirier fight. It's been some tough fights for him since coming to the UFC. You know, but he's exciting. He's a fun fighter. I hope he wins this weekend. I love Charles Oliveira too, but for Michael Chandler to sit out for so long, waiting on a red panty night, like Conor McGregor calls it, he deserves a little comeuppance in life. You know, I mean, he's 38 years old. Oliveira's not that young either. I hope he needs to just make sure he gets Oliveira to the ground and controls him. Not damage him. The damage will come, but control him. Because once you start trying to damage, that gives Oliveira space to create the angles, to create the scrambles, to create the submission threats or the get up. Michael Chandler's a great wrestler. He wrestled at Missouri. But he needs to make sure he takes his time. Bo Nickal's back. And I got a video coming out on him probably tomorrow. He's fighting Paul Craig. But are we cold on Bo Nickal yet? Because his last fight was Cody Brundage. You remember Cody Brundage? He lat dropped Bo Nickal of all people. Like, what? What is going on here? Bo Nickal's been getting the comeuppance treatment for a while now. And now they're finally throwing him a name in Paul Craig. But is this really a comeuppance thing? Okay, because this is a middleweight fight. Craig's a traditional light heavyweight. Been fighting at middleweight for a while, though. Right? But go look at his middleweights. Andre Muniz, Okay, he won that. But his last two, Brendan Allen and Cal Baralho, not very promising. He literally was running from Cal Baralho, turned his back and ran, and ate a left as he was running. Brendan Allen is the fight that really worries me the most for Paul Craig. Allen dominated, just from pillar to post, beat the snot out of Paul Craig. Middleweight Paul Craig, draining himself too much Paul Craig. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Bo Nickal is a true middleweight, actually cutting a little bit. He fought at 194, whatever it is, in college, or he wrestled at 194, 197. Craig's killing himself to make 185. Nickal's like, I'm right there. He's a wrestler. Craig's a terrible wrestler. His hands look terrible, so he kicks at range. You're going to kick at a wrestler like Bo Nickal? Come on, bro. Now, I get he's a submission threat on the ground. Cool. Bo Nickal can really use this as an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going 3 rounds. Then we'll get the finish. I'm going to use my hands, show you what we've been working on. You know, Bo Nickal's hands aren't that great. Then we'll get the finish. I'm going to have to learn to deal with the low kick. So let's see a right cross. Boom. Then we'll get the finish. Yeah, submit him on the ground. Or you might just come out there and Khabib him. But I'm not so cold on Bo Nickal despite the bad Cody Brundage fight. I'm not. You know, Bo Nickal, he really wants to fight for the title, and there's an argument to be made that, you know, he could go out there and fight with Khamzat right now. Not saying he beats Khamzat, but he could fight with Khamzat. Khamzat has the ability to keep the fight on the feet. We're not going to talk about Khamzat. No, we're talking about Bo Nickal and Paul Craig. But no, Bo Nickal really needs to go out there and have a big statement after that fight with Cody Brundage at UFC 300. That was like, okay, why was this even on the main card? Remember, that was a lot of the rhetoric coming into that fight and going out of the fight. Like, he shouldn't have been on the main card. He's in New York now, which is right next door to Pennsylvania, which is where he wrestled. Which is why we see a lot of the people we see, like Jon Jones, on this card. I don't know. I just need to see Bo Nickal do something a little bit more, a little bit stronger, and a little bit better. Paul Craig is the type of person to do that. This is not a step up from Cody Brundage at this point and at this weight for Paul Craig. It's just a name people know a little bit better. Oh, he beat Paul Craig. People forget about that Cody Brundage fight. People forget about it quick if he goes out there and chins Paul Craig in a round, or if he dominates him for 3 rounds. That won't even be a thought in your head. But, you know, Bo Nickal's got a ways to go. He's very young. He's 6-0, so he's very young in his career. 28 at middleweight in a bad division. You know, you've got some things to work on. Elsewhere on this card, Karine Silva and Viviana Rujao, do not care. Mauricio Ruffy versus James Lontop, okay. Jonathan Martinez, decent, versus Marcus McGee, okay. But the one that really concerns me most, tragedy for Chris Weidman in New York City. Chris Weidman, one of my all-time favorite fighters back in the Gap. When he beat Anderson Silva, I'm like, wow, he's fantastic. And then they legalized UFC in New York. And I don't think you quite understand just what that means. Right? So, every time he fights in New York, Chris Weidman loses. Let's go over it real quick. I got to search it real quick. UFC, New York City, MSG. Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez. Let's look at this. You remember this one? Yo Romero's flying knee split him wide open, bleeding like a stuck pig. All right, so he's going to fight UFC 210, Gegard Mousasi. Buffalo, New York. That's Cormier versus Rumble 2. Gegard Mousasi knees him in the head. New York. I think the Romero fight was, that's still my boy. Okay. Kelvin Gastelum, Jacare. Let's see where Jacare was. UFC 230, Madison Square Garden. Jacare knocks out Chris Weidman in round 3. Are we done yet? Hold on. Let's see. Okay, Boston, Massachusetts. We'll give them credit for the Reyes loss. Let's see. Uriah Hall. Let's do another one, guys. Uriah Hall. That was in Florida. He can. That's a legitimate win. That's not a fake win. 292. I don't think Sterling was in. Yeah, that was in Boston too. So Every time Chris Weidman fights in New York, he loses, and loses badly. Let's just hope he's fighting Eric Anders, who's completely washed in his own right, but has some highlight capability. Let's just hope Eric Anders doesn't end his days, because that would be absolutely dreadful. Oh, boy. All right. Jim Miller, Damon Jackson's a fun fight. I wish Miller would retire after 300, but he might want to go out on a win. Damon Jackson's a winnable fight for him. Marcin Tybura has looked dreadful in his last few fights. Remember that Spivak armbar? And then he choked out Tai Tuivasa, which isn't saying much. He is fighting Johanna Denise. Let me get over to the web view real quick for you fellas. Johanna Denise. Mickey Gall's back. 7-6 Mickey Gall. No reason to be in the UFC's Mickey Gall versus Ramiz Baramaj. Don't know anything about him. Oban Elliott versus Basil Hafez. Okay. And then Veronica Hardy versus Eduarda Mora. So yeah, decent amount of fights on the card. Some that kind of, fell through. But, so check it out. This weekend, I'm going to Gamebred FC, and I'm doing episode 5 of Fight Finders, my favorite series I do. I'm filming Brandon Davis as he fights for the title for Bare Knuckle MMA. Catch up on Fight Finders, episode 4, right here. This is the birth and death and rebirth of bare knuckle boxing. You want to check it out? Catch up on Fight Finders. Fantastic series.